Hey, Joyce, how are you?
Hi, Adam. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Thanks for the intro, Alex. Great to be here. Maybe we could kick off, Joyce, by elaborating on the intro that Alex provided and maybe explaining a little bit about what Pegafund does.
Sure, I'd love to do that. So, hi, everyone. I'm Joyce. Thank you so much for taking part in this session with Adam and I. Just to give you a bit more context on Pegafund, what we do is we provide CFO services to high-growth European SaaS scale-ups that are typically between 1 to 10 million euros in ARR.
That's great. Hey, everyone, and I probably should introduce myself too. I'm Adam Tesan, CRO of Chargebee. We provide a subscription and billing management platform for high-growth SaaS companies. So Joyce and I have experience servicing similar customers rather in their life cycle stage. So looking forward to the conversation. Hey, Joyce, to get us started, you founded Pegafund as you saw a need in the market for orgs of all sizes really needing to build out the CFO office. And the CFO office has really become more critical and strategic in all sizes of organizations. Can you elaborate maybe on how this modern CFO's office mandate and expectations are evolving?
Yeah, definitely. So for a bit of background, before I started Pegafund, I was a software investor for 7 years, investing across private equity, growth equity, and VC-backed companies in US and Europe. And what I realized working very closely with a lot of these portfolio companies is that there was a dire need for the modern day CFO. And what does that really mean? It means that the modern CFO is familiar with SaaS tooling, and in particular, how the overall SaaS business model has really placed in a much bigger emphasis on profitability, or in other words, unit economics versus managing the cost and cash side of the business. And the reason being is because of all the tools that have been born in the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years that are attributable to marketing, sales, product, and engineering. And also because in a COVID environment, we're all working remotely, right? So that means we're selling to customers across the world. It means we're recruiting talent from across the world. So the pace in which we're operating as businesses has just become a lot quicker and much more complex. And so that means the CFO does need to be a critical stakeholder in making those go-to-market decisions and also influencing the motions behind them.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a recent Salesforce survey had indicated like 68% of CFOs face challenges in exploring new ways to support better reoccurring business models. And I think that's kind of where you're going. Like all SaaS businesses have this reoccurring business model, and within that becomes, a different set of challenges and also skills. What do you think some of those challenges are with this kind of modern day SaaS reoccurring revenue business model that the CFOs are facing and need to be armed for?
Yeah, and I mean, Salesforce is a great example, right? Because they were born in the late 90s, pre-cloud and pre-SaaS. And they've been one of the biggest buyers, both in terms of, let's say, VC investing, so early stage buying, but also corporate buyers of modern day SaaS solutions. And the reason being is because of, all the tools that have been born in the last 5 and 10 years, specifically as it relates to helping businesses, not just SaaS businesses, scale and grow faster. But in particular, I think when it comes to modern day tooling, it's really firstly, understanding that in a SaaS and COVID environment, you have 3 very key operational complexities, which directly relate to, for instance, the pricing and packaging strategy. So that's become a lot more complex as we're selling in a global environment. Billing cycles, in the past when we were in the on-premise perpetual license world, it was a lot more simpler. Today you have multi-year, annual, quarterly, monthly, and now usage-based, which has been even more popularized in the last 18 months. And then you're also dealing with FX, right? So when you deal with a global customer base and a global talent pool, most companies even pre-10 million ARR are dealing with anywhere from 5 to 10 different currencies. And when all of that is changing so quickly and constantly, it's really important that you have core tooling and systems that is able to keep up with the pace of execution and the precision that's required around that execution.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that that I've chatted with other folks around. It's kind of this agile mindset. Things are moving so fast now at such a pace, accelerated to your point with the pandemic. That agile mindset, and not only agile mindset, but then you need the systems and tools to be able to move along as agile as your mind's moving, I suppose, is a good way to put it. So I know in our previous conversations you'd mentioned recommending a playbook to the companies that you're working with on core tooling and systems. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, in the past, the finance department would be predominantly responsible for your accounting, and maybe if you're a larger organization, a growth or public company, you would have FP&A tooling as well. Even increasingly so because of the focus on revenue visibility and predictability and ultimately scaling of an organization. It's important to have not only your core accounting system, your CRM system, but also increasingly so what we're recommending is to have your subscription management system, for instance, Chargebee or...
I like that a lot, yeah.
As well as data warehouse and business intelligence visualization tooling from day one.
Gotcha.
That way you can get a single source of truth when it comes to your entire customer base and how you recognize revenue and the different types of revenue in a very quick, easy, accessible, and trustworthy manner.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the tech stack's evolving, and it needs to evolve to be able to keep up with that kind of agile nature of how the business needs to be run, and adapting to the rapid changing external forces in the market. You mentioned pricing and packaging. Being able to experiment with that is critical. I mean, we have customers that do daily pricing experiments, especially when they're in new markets trying to figure out what's working. You mentioned something there as well that I thought was interesting, which is the treatment of revenue. And there's the ASC 606, it's counterpart of IFRS 15 over in Europe. And when we were talking, while it's mandated over in the US with the 606, that's actually not the case in Europe. But you actually mentioned something interesting in our previous dialogue around the advice that you're providing startups in the EU, on whether how much attention I suppose they should pay to IFRS 15. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So for, I think half the audience here is between 1 to 10 million ARR today. And so that means likely you're not yet reporting under IFRS, which is a internationally recognized accounting standard. What is most likely the situation is that you're reporting under local regulatory requirements. However, if you start selling into the US or you become a global entity or global business with multiple entities, at some stage you're going to have to report under IFRS, which means that as a SaaS business, you need to follow the principles of ASC 606. And I'm just going to requote what was mentioned in a trade report that I read recently, Accounting Today, which said that ASC 606 is probably one of the biggest changes in the accounting industry for over 100 years. And the reason it's been a big change is because fundamentally, there are 5 conditions in which you need to meet as a SaaS business in order to recognize revenue. And I won't go into detail on those 5 conditions because you can actually find it on the Chargebee blog, written very clearly. But in particular, why this makes it, let's say, more challenging for companies that are switching from local statutory reporting to IFRS is that it means that the foundation, which I heard in the previous session by Ben, when it comes to your bookkeeping and specifically your general ledger and your chart of accounts, needs to be done ideally accurately from day one. And that's often, I would say, not the case for most early stage European SaaS companies, because a lot of your local bookkeepers and accounting firms don't yet have, a wealth of experience when it comes to the nuances of a SaaS business. One of the practicalities of that is that they're just not in the business day to day, right? And they're managing lots of different clients. So they're not close to the customers. They're not close to the leadership in the business. And so what is really important is that you need to have a tool and a process in place to actually recognize revenue according to these principles. And increasingly so for a lot of companies we work with, we actually use the subscription management solution as a single source of truth rather than your core accounting system, because it's closest to the truth of where your customer contracts lie, and it gives you the best indication of what is actually recognized revenue for a business.
Yeah, great points. And I think this is all, exacerbated with complexity due to the agile nature of the businesses that we were just talking about, because all those changes that happen to these subscription plans impact the way that revenue is going to be recognized. And when you start getting into hundreds, then thousands of these plans, and there's modifications and add-ons and changes happening to each one of those customers' plans, then that's going to impact that, the revenue recognition for each. We realize the complexity and heavy lift that this required. I think you alluded to kind of having subscription management platforms being the source of truth, and then we've added on that ability for the revenue recognition piece, because it is really complicated. So I totally agree. We mentioned that half the audience is in this 1 to 10 million kind of range. One of the things that's interesting about your business is, the concept of kind of you're providing, the CFO as a service to these B2B software startups. What are the signals or triggers that a business needs to start thinking about that you see? They're like, okay, here are the signals and triggers, and we think this company is getting ready to stand up that office.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually use a CRM solution ourselves and implement processes around inbound and outbound, very similar to how a SaaS company operates. And as part of that, when we look at whether a business is in our ideal customer profile, we look at, for instance, LinkedIn data around scale and growth. And we also look at the existing organizational setup of the business. So we'll actually do a search on LinkedIn for whether there's someone in a dedicated finance and operations role. And generally, if that is the case, then it tells you that the company has prioritized scaling systems quite early on. If it's a company with more than 100 FTEs and they don't have someone in finance and operations, there's probably scalability as well as profitability issues associated with it, especially if it's a well-funded business. And then when we get on a discovery or demo call to figure out whether we can actually tangibly help that business at this point in time, either this quarter or next quarter, one of the first questions I ask is actually, what tools and systems are you using today? So I ask, what does your bookkeeper use? What does your accountant use? What is your CRM system? Do you have a subscription management systems? Oftentimes they don't. And what is your revenue model and billing cycle, right? So and generally, if it's a business with more than 50 different call it variables, and what I mean by that is if it's 50 customers and they're on annual billing, or if it's 25 customer logos and they're on annual and usage-based billing, then our recommendation is that they bring in a subscription management solution ASAP. Because at some point, if you're looking to go on a high growth journey, it's not going to scale.
Got it. Yeah. We have similar signals and triggers on our side. You mentioned something interesting there as well, like with this whole shift to SaaS tooling and the evolution of the tech stack and the different tools required to manage this agile environment. Mm-hmm. Requires a new set of skills for CFOs or the finance team at large. with regards to the tooling and then the reoccurring, revenue nature of the business as well. So you've mentioned that titles matter, I think was one of the things that you mentioned. And what you meant by that was it reflects the different skill sets of leaders. Can you kind of elaborate on what what that profile looks like and the skill sets that look like for this kind of modern CFO or finance leader stepping into these high growth businesses?
Yeah, definitely. I think titles matter not only because they indicate skill set, but they also indicate the operational, call it system scaling maturity of a business, especially those that are looking to go on a high growth, typically a venture-backed journey. And what I mean by that is specifically, within the finance department today, there is a lot of noise around what titles mean and what it requires for which types of businesses when. So to clarify a little bit and cut through that noise a little, the different titles that do come about when you're looking to build out a finance department is one, there's the head of finance, there's also revenue operations, and then of course there's different seniority attached to that revenue operations role. There's the VP of finance, and then there's also the CFO, which we call the modern CFO or strategic growth CFO. And the differences between each of these roles really boil down to a couple of things. One, it's their ability to command modern day SaaS tooling and systems. So your head of finance typically has not dealt with, subscription management solutions. They have not really worked outside of your core accounting or ERP solutions. They're very much used to managing business and financial costs and the liquidity around that cost infrastructure. Your revenue operations professional is typically someone who's very well versed in subscription management systems and also with data warehouse and BI visualization tools, because they need to implement all the processes associated with really maintaining data integrity, specifically around revenue and customers that drive that revenue. And your VP of finance is the one that, in a perfect world, would derive the insights that's coming out of all the different, core systems that you're using, accounting, CRM, subscription management, data warehouse, and BI, but also is super well versed and experienced in being a critical business partner in a SaaS environment and in a business that has scaled across multiple rounds of funding. And ultimately, your modern CFO is one that understands also the funding and the corporate landscape. So who do you raise money from? At what point do you look at inorganic growth? At what point do you exit the company? The whole capital markets function is super important because it helps align internal stakeholders with external stakeholders and allows the business to continue to remain competitive, not only in the its own industry landscape, but also amongst the funding options that are available.
Yeah, you could have a whole session on the staffing of this org. I think it's kind of this intersection of strategy, decision making, technology. Working in an agile framework, being able to help the business adopt quickly and intelligently to change. Yeah, super interesting. And then I also heard someone mention this concept of a product finance person, which in PLG organizations is super interesting, right? It's a whole other game. We're about running out of time, but I'd love to hear one or two. Hey, here's a couple pitfalls or big mistakes that we see organizations kind of right in this stage, just about to either embark on this journey or have embarked on it, and they've taken a misstep. Any advice on the one or two pitfalls or mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, I would say just from a super high level, when you're moving away from a founder, business owner organization to a business that is dependent much more on systems, but of course people's experience. So what we call moving away from a family to a high performing sports team. Two things that are really important: documentation. If things are not documented and the processes are not visualized and communicated throughout a business, it's probably not happening consistently. And this is where you end up creating silos between different functions: marketing, sales, product, engineering, finance, and operations. So documentation is super important. It helps with onboarding. It helps people become ramp very quickly and become productive. And it also helps with business alignment. And then the second thing around that, which Chargebee and subscription management solutions help a lot with, is really the data integrity. So really making sure that when I look at SQLs that are being generated by marketing and also the SQLs that are being generated by sales, that we're actually talking both about the same set of SQLs. So how do you define SQLs? What are the processes around it? How do you ultimately build a business case between how much you're investing in inbound versus outbound? These are super, super important. And it's often this, call it data integrity, and transforming the data in a way that makes sense to influence decision-making that takes a long time. And is often something that's also undervalued by a lot of businesses until the problems start happening.
Great advice. Joyce, been a pleasure speaking with you. I think the kind of wrap on this is the tech stack has changed in order to facilitate this agile hypergrowth in organizations, and the skill sets needed to harness the power in that tech stack and help the business move is also changed as well. So really appreciate all the insights and advice. It was great speaking with you, and hopefully we look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you, Adam. Great to speak with you as well.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Joyce. That was fantastic. A very quick question, as we are a little bit over, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So we had a question from Kailash and Anne-Marie, who said, there are so many tools, Stripe, Chargebee, Chargeify, becomes difficult to choose. Any suggestions? And Anne-Marie kind of chips in saying, is there a process to system selection for your particular company? Seems like with so many, one could get very bogged down in that process. So what would you advise very quickly?
Was that a question directed at me or Adam?
You're probably better. You're probably better suited to answer this one.
I think first you need to understand what are the existing tools that are being used inside the business today. And then also really understand what are the key objectives of the business going forward and how quickly are you looking to grow. I think the faster you're looking to grow, the more urgent it is to implement best of class tooling, because it will actually enable that growth and really help support that data integrity that I just mentioned. And then it's a matter of ultimately understanding, what's the operational complexity of setup. When things do start becoming complicated is when you start having teams across many operating subsidiaries, and you also have customers that are being charged in different currencies. When you start having that happening, it's really, really important to have a subscription management solution in place. And generally, of course, we're sort of slightly biased in this regard. Our recommendation is for early stage companies sub 10 million, is to implement a combination of Xero and Chargebee if you have ambitions to also be in the US.
Yeah.
All right. We'll probably end it on that note just because we're 5 minutes over now. But thank you so much, Joyce and Adam. Great talk. Let's show our appreciation to both for some fantastic insights there. So thanks so much, and appreciate you joining us today for Blueprint for CFOs.
Thank you, Alex, for having us.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks.